having a little chat about the new hairstyle.
All right. So, guys, for those of you who know me, I'm Prakash already, you know that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Prakash. So what happened was last week we had T-Mash. He came out. He was very passionate about a lot of things apart from the book. President Donald Trump dropped the F-bomb in one of his interviews, and it just so happened we also got one of our first F-bombs last week with Tim. And once the interview was done, I woke up the next morning and boom, my hair was all gone. And I just got bored and I kind of, removed my hair. That's it. There's no other story out there. We will wait, I think, a minute or two or three, for Adam to join in. And this is always the worrying time, that 1 or 2 minutes before the author or the guest joins in, you're always like, I hope nothing goes wrong. And I hope that Adam has got the link. I shared it with Alex. And we will wait. He will join us in a couple of minutes, hopefully. And I think that's about it. Yeah, from my side. Louis, was it warm enough for discussion?
So I'm happy to kick off and welcome you all to Behavioural Science Club. Can you all hear me? Yes. And maybe as we wait for Adam to join us, we'll just have a little kind of resume about how we've come to this point in time. Been going since the start of July, and this is our fourth book of the month. So first of all, we looked at alchemy, and sort of the main message we took away from that was, let's not be too logical. I think it's fair to say Rory Sutherland has a dislike of logical thought, economists. So the message to us all was to try to think illogically in the way that humans naturally do, and to try to bring a bit of magic into either the area, if we're working in marketing, bring it into marketing. And he also obviously talked about behavioural science. And then we moved on to a slightly different approach from Patrick Fagan. And as kind of is inherent with his personality, it was a more scientific approach. A lot of background, a lot of reference to all of the various different experiments, but at the back then, the second half of the book, very much using his knowledge and skills about how to hook people in. Hooked, so it's called, how to hook people in, how to draw them in. And then a very different approach, speaking our third book of the month from Bree Williams, Behavioural Economics, a very practical book. A lot of people liked this book. It had practical skills to take away so that you could use them, whether it's either in your own field of behavioural science, whether it's in your marketing agency, or whether it's just for anyone who wants to, the best way to design their website, things like that. So a hugely practical book. I think we all really enjoyed having Brie as a guest. And then today we are very lucky to have with us Adam Ferrier. Adam Ferrier, author of our book of the month for October, Stop Listening to the Customer. And the argument is exactly that, setting out to explain the reasons why listening to the customer can be at the expense of growing a brand. Now, as you all know, you don't have to have read the book to join us today. You're all very welcome, and you'll learn a lot about the book, whether or not you've read it, from our chat with Adam. And you're very welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, great. Thank you for that intro. Hello, everyone. I'm just busy trying to get the chat working.
Okay, so whilst you sort that out, Adam, I'll say that I felt there were three main messages in this book, which is the danger of listening to the customer, the importance of knowing what your message is with your brand, And then obviously an area I was hugely interested in, the danger of listening to traditional market research, but not a complete damnation of the industry, more guidance of where we should better focus our resources in. So if I could hand over to you then, Adam, and maybe we'll talk about the first aspect there, the danger that you see of listening to the customer and the potential then for the homogenous message that brands are tending to put out at present. So you're very welcome, Adam.
I reckon let's start with your third premise. Sorry to derail this slightly, but I want to start with the whole thing about market research, and I just want to have a quick conversation on that, if you don't mind. And I think because you're in market research and your background is mainly market research, and if you're organising this, that means you probably attracted a pool of people who are from a similar discipline. And I can remember I was a clinical psychologist, I was a forensic psychologist, got a clinical master's in psych, worked in prison system, worked in anxiety disorders clinics. Then a friend of mine rang me and said, "Oh, I'm sitting behind a mirror watching a focus group, and people are talking about baking cakes. That's what you wanted to do, isn't it?" And I said, "That's exactly what I wanted to. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a consumer psychologist, and that's what I'd imagine I'd be doing, talking to people in focus group rooms and working out why they do shit." And so I swapped from forensic psychology, working in the prison system, and went straight to market research. And when I was in market research, everyone used to say to me, this is a lot like psychology, isn't it? And I would just say to them, nah, nothing like it. This is completely made up. Psychology is completely evidence-based, and the two things feel completely different. This is 20 years ago, so. And what astounded me was, as a psychologist, everything he said had to be evidence-based. And that was a bit shit, because at the end of the day, there's this thing called cognitive behavior therapy, which is, had to try to capture people's faulty cognitions, and at the time had to replace them with rational cognitions. And the whole thing was just kind of bullshit. But it was all evidence-based that it worked. So that was a bit shit. But then on the other side, market research I went into, it was just making it all up. It just had no frameworks. There was no... It was all just listening. And if you had a good client, you could tell... And then what happened is behavioural... Can you hear me okay? Am I breaking up? Am I breaking up at all?
A little bit, Adam, but you're still with us. Keep going. Yeah, you're still with us.
I'm just going to switch to tether.
Thanks, Adam. And I'll just take the opportunity to say to people, my Wi-Fi has been dropping all over the place. So if I suddenly disappear, Prakash is just going to rapidly take over. Okay, Adam.
I think we're okay now. And so then what happened was behavioural economics came along, and behavioural economics stole everything from psychology. It gave it a new framework which Daniel Kahneman did with System 1, System 2 thinking, which again stole a lot of what psychologists were babbling on about. But they put it in a very applied setting, and then it suddenly all started to make sense, and I started to have a framework and language around what I was doing in market research and moving on into advertising. And that's what I think has saved the industry. And I think you can see a whole lot of new evidence-based market research firms that they just have their head around the science of it all a little bit more. And so I reckon that's been fascinating. So now if somebody asks me, I'll say, yeah, psychology and market research now is very, very similar, but it certainly didn't used to feel that way.
Thanks, Adam. Just to put your mind at rest, I think I'm in the minority here as a market researcher.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, the preponderance of members are either in behavioural science or very much focused on behavioural science. The start of the book, where we're talking about the danger of listening to the customer.
Yeah, so I do a lot of public speaking, and when I go to clients, the first thing my clients always tell me is that we are customer obsessed. So every single new brief I get, it's all about we're customer obsessed, and we want to let all of our staff know that we're customer obsessed. And that got me thinking that this is starting to sound a bit like bullshit. How can you really be customer obsessed and be selling sugary water in a can? If you really were customer obsessed, would your business exist in the first place? If you're truly customer obsessed, would you pack up and just go home? If you're truly customer obsessed, would you advertise? Because people don't like ads, they don't like their shows interrupted and so forth. And so that was a kind of observation one. The second observation was I used to do a lot of brand positioning work, a lot of brand strategy work. And I think what's happened is as people's knowledge of the customer has gone up, we understand lots and lots about customers through customer journeys and so forth. The knowledge of our branding and how branding and brand principles has gone down. And so lots of people now don't know the fundamentals of how to do brand positioning. And that's again in market research, but then also in behavioural sciences and even marketing sciences to a degree. There's very little about how to construct a brand in that, with the exception of Bill Barton and all of his work, which you guys have already spoken to, which is fantastic. And then the third thing is if you do read the market research, it always talks about that consumers don't want your brand, they want your category. So the need that's triggered is for the category, not for your brand. So you're walking down the street and you feel thirsty, that's the trigger for the category, not your brand. Or you're finishing school and you want to get an education so you can get a job. It's at a category level, not at a brand level. You very rarely have a need for the brand. You need to look something up online. You don't need Google. You need to, you need a new car. You don't need a new Volvo. And so now everyone's talking about category entry points as being the driver for brand decisions and meeting the needs of the category entry point. But I think what that's starting to do is make more and more homogenized brands. So all car brands are starting to marry style and performance. All beer brands are offering refreshment. And so you start to see brands just offering really, really generic claims and then just having to rely on distinctive assets. And so the more you listen to the consumer, just by definition, the more you're going to make your brand like everybody else, because the consumer does not need your brand, they need the category. So you listen to them and you'll homogenize your brand.
Thanks, Adam. And maybe you'd talk a little bit about the work that you spoke about in the book, a lot by a little and a little by a lot, which appears to be an inherent fact, but one that you think possibly few pay attention to.
In Australia, we live right next door to Byron Sharp and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. And his whole concept of negative binomial distribution for how markets work is accepted across the board here. And it's pretty much accepted in the UK, and America is struggling with it. But that's the basic, that's his principle, that basically to make a brand grow, keep on attracting light users into the category. But that's then when you listen to the customer, the voices that are easiest to listen to and are easiest to hear are the heavy users, and they're the ones who've already got already. So it's much easier to hear them, whether it be in social listening or their opinions seem louder. They're closer to the business. You know more about them. Whereas the light users, the ones you don't have a relationship, they're the voices you really want to understand because they're the ones you want to keep on attracting. But again, the more you listen to the consumer, probably the less you're going to listen to the right consumer, because the ones you already have are easier to speak to.
And Adam, on a practical basis, in that I I felt that the main message was really almost a call for going back to marketing 101, go back to, facing up to identifying what is the brand. But for marketers here today with us, when their clients come to them and they're so strongly focused on the customer message, what do you think is the kind of strongest way to then wade in and put forward the argument for the strength of developing the brand?
I just asked them what their brand stands for. And I'd ask them, if I asked 3 or 4 people in your business what your brand stood for, would they all say the same thing? And if they do say that, I'll say, great, let's start pushing it out there. But if they don't, then it probably needs to come back to the fundamentals of understanding the brand positioning. And we do talk about doing that, the thing of advertising as a taxi pay for not having for not having a remarkable product. And we do talk about holistic branding and starting with your employees first and then working out from there. And although that's kind of marketing 101, it's just not done that often. There are a few examples of brands that do it, that know that everything they do communicates the brand. But there are still a shitload who either don't know that or B, don't know how to operationalize that. And that's where I think this cohort of people can certainly help.
Thanks, Adam. That's a great introduction to the book. And certainly I think you've thrown out loads already to interest people here today. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Prakash, who'll carry on with the conversation. Thanks very much, Adam.
That's all right.
Thank you, Louise. Adam, welcome to the Behavioral Science Club. Before we go on with more questions, for people who have joined us from different time zones, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. For people who are from the subcontinent out here, India, we know they are waiting for this fantastic T20 cricket match, which is going to start in another 45 minutes.
Who's playing?
I think it's Royal Challengers Bangalore. This is like internal teams.
Yeah.
You know the IPL? Fantastic. Okay. I think that will get you another 20 or 30 new fans right now at this moment. So thank you so much for joining in. We also know there are people right now from West Indies who have joined us. It's like 5 a.m. out there. So thank you all for coming in. And, we will start talking about this book, why this particular book, why this particular title. But before we go out there, a lot of us are curious about what was Adam doing before he wrote down this book, before he was doing advertising. And I found out something very interesting. Right there on your LinkedIn, you said you were working with, you began your career working in a maximum security prisons. Please tell us a little bit about that, that part out there, what was happening out there, and how do you go out from working in maximum security prisons, to working as a consumer psychologist and then write this book?
Thank you, mate. Thank you for the question. When I was at school, when I was at school, I wasn't very good at school, and I used to spend a lot of my time trading shares and playing the stock market. There was only one landline in the school, so every lunchtime I'd jump on the landline in the school, and I'd speak to my stockbroker all lunchtime and trade shares. And then at the end of lunchtime, I'd hang up and go back to my classes. And I was always known as the kind of the guy who played the stock market and that kind of thing. And then I was failing school at the same time. And a tutor said to me, what are your interests? And I said, my interests are money and people. And the tutor said, oh, you should become a consumer psychologist. And as soon as he said that, I thought, that's exactly what I want to be. That's perfect. And I was 17 at the time. I then studied marketing and psychology. I got sidetracked into forensic psychology to get a job, and basically went into the prison system, specialised working with sex offenders in the sex offender program. And I found that fascinating. I then went into private practice, assessing people for court, and looking at their levels of dangerousness and writing court reports and things like that, which again was really interesting. But then I got that phone call from my mate who said, you know, you should get into market research. I did that, became a cool hunter for a while, traveled the world, identifying trends for Levi's and Pepsi, and then got into advertising after that at Saatchi & Saatchi, and then Naked Communications. But the prison stuff's cool. The prison stuff's really interesting. What the prison stuff's taught me is it's good to do something genuinely out there and interesting, because you kind of keep on talking about it for the rest of your life. So go work in a prison for a year or two. You get a lot of dinner party stories out of it, and you can hold on to those forever.
Oh, fantastic! You have this phrase called measured magic. I think it's connected to you putting up Thinkerbell together. What exactly is measured magic, Adam?
Thank you for the question. We when I started the new agency, we needed a proposition, and our proposition was marketing sciences meets hardcore creativity, and then we summed that up as measured magic. And our logo is Rodin's The Thinker with Tinkerbell's wings on it. And measured magic drives everything the agency does. And it's really just a fun way of saying evidence-based creativity or evidence-based solutions. But I think agencies need two things. They need to be really, really creative, and they need to be much more accountable than they've ever been before. The issue that behavioural economics has and the behavioural sciences has, it attracts a certain type of person and organisations, but they're just not creative enough. So they start to get really, I don't know, they need more creatives in that, because you can identify the opportunity, but it's getting that creative work on top of it that's really, really hard. And I still think just having genuinely really creative people in that problem solving area is really important.
Thank you for that. You're talking about the type of people who join in marketing department or are pursuing behavioral economics, and you start talking about the creative type of mind. It reminded me of a little bit of something which Werner Herzog, I think, when he was putting a master class for teaching people how to make films, he seemed to be asking for people to come from as diverse background as possible. And have you felt? I mean, it's almost like a dumb question, but have you felt your experiences when you're working in those maximum security prison, or people that you have known who have had unconventional careers in their life? Have you seen that seems to help people more when it comes to creative solutions in the field of marketing? And if so, what is it that prompts these people to have a certain more creative mind, if you can put it like that?
I think it's more about how people identify themselves rather than the skills they have. It makes somebody creative. So I don't think it matters the discipline or where they've come from. It's more about, do they self-identify as that? And strongly associated with that is a sense of confidence and self-efficacy. So in psychology beat the shit out of me and told me you cannot be creative. There's no room for creativity in psychology. And they did that for 6 years. And I came out of that believing that I was a scientist, and science do things in a science kind of way or whatever it is. And then it took me years. It took me about 10 years, I reckon, to shake that off. And now I feel like I'm more creative now than I've ever been in my career. And I'm doing more creative work and more interesting ideas and stuff, just because I have the confidence, and I know that I'm creative, and I know my ideas, and maybe it's just from experience as well, but I know that they're good or that they're right. So I think it's I don't think it matters where you're from. I think you need to understand what a good idea is and have the confidence to be able to identify a good idea from a not good idea. And for me, that's come from experience.
Thank you, Adam, for that answer. For people who have joined in or who have joined in recently, right, the last couple of minutes, please keep on, please keep your questions ready. You can share them on the chat box. In a couple of minutes, we'll start taking them one by one. But we have, I think, another couple, 4 or 5 minutes before we start doing that. So Adam, here's the thing, right? For most of us, we already are in a certain phase in our career, right? So there's no going back. There are some students here too, and there are a lot of students in this group, the Behavioral Science Club, who I'm sure are going to be very happy with your story, saying, okay, so you can do multiple things, and then you can end up and eventually discover what you want to do. People like us who are, say, in their mid-30s, 40s, 50s, who already have had a set career, is there some sort of a way for us, people who may not have had, that diverse career in the beginning, to make sure or to find a way to increase the spark of creativity, out-of-box thinking, whichever way we want to say that, right? Is there something that we can do? And we ask this because you work in the whole creative industry, Adam. Is it even doable?
There is. There's something very practical you can do, and it's a very good question. And Edward de Bono told me this, and I love it. I'm not a big fan of Edward de Bono, but I love this. He wrote a book once called How to Be More Interesting. Pretty weird title for a book, but it's pretty weird to pick it up and read it, which I've done. And I was so impressed with this book, but I spoke to him about it years ago later at this thing. And have a deep interest. And if you can go deep on something, and ideally go deep on something that nobody else is going deep on, that'll be an internal well of associations in your brain that not many other people will have. And at the moment, because of this fucking thing, everybody is getting superficial knowledge fed at them all the time, and all of us will be on the same social media feeds and getting the same crap from LinkedIn all the time. So you have to leave this scene, go deep into something completely unrelated to this, and stay there for as long as you can. Stay there for years, just weekly or monthly, and that'll be your creative that'll get your creative juices happening. That's what I strongly would recommend. Have a deep, nourishing interest that's got nothing to do with what you do day to day, and ideally as weird and as out there as possible.
All right. Adam, I like the example of the phone that you bought. I like the F-bomb too. So yeah, we got 2 in a row. I think we are on a good track. Extrapolating from what you're saying, right? You look at the book, Stop Listening to the Customer or the Consumer, right? And it's very easy to bring it down to one sentence in today's world, saying, oh, Adam is saying, don't listen to the customer. And that's it. And we are all in a hurry. So all we want to see in that 10,000 word article review or the book is that one line, don't listen to the customer. On the other hand, you'll be having these methodologies like design thinking and all, which if you want to bring down to one sentence, will say something like, understand your customer, which someone can then interpret to mean listen to your customer, right? So it's a world where we are in a hurry to reduce, we are in a hurry to remove nuances and reduce complex ideas to 1 or 2 sentences. And the phone plays definitely a big role in it. As individuals, right? What can we do as brands? What can we do in a world that has become full of noise? With branding and communication, noise has always been an issue, and it's more so in today's world. Possibly it's going to get worse. Where do you see this going? What can brands do? What can people do? It's a very open-ended question, but whichever way you want to take this question, Adam.
Halfway through your question, I had a good answer and then I lost it.
Oh boy.
So stop listening to your customer was the main thing. Try. So stop listening to your customer. That's the headline.
Right.
Try hearing your brain.
You have people who are reducing complex, large-scale ideas to one sentence, and that's all they want to take from it. So they go out and say, Adam says, don't listen to customer. Is Adam against design thinking?
Yes, Adam is against design thinking. Adam hates design thinking. I hate human-centered design. I hate anything that puts the customer at the heart of the business, at the heart of something. It's all bullshit. The reason why is it's not correct. It's not true. It's not authentic. It's the opposite of authentic. And then it's also dressed up. Human-centered design is dressed up in this bullshit sense of authenticity as well. The whole industry is kidding itself. The main reason you want those consumer insights, or you want to understand the customer, is to sell them something. You want to wrap a brand around that experience. You want to wrap Coca-Cola around that experience, or Facebook around that experience. You want to wrap a brand around it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand the customer so that the brand can express themselves in a way that locks the consumer into something. So it's not putting the brand first. It's trying to get insights to express the brand. Now, it's such a weird situation. If you look at any human-centered design manual, it doesn't even have the brand on there. So what happens is a human-centered designer will go into a bank. They'll go into HSBC and they'll do a massive big project for human-centered design principles. And what they'll do is they'll eradicate all the friction out of that kind of situation, and they might even find a few moments of joy. But they're never doing that against expressing what HSBC as a brand stands for. They're always doing it against what the consumer insight tells them to do. That's to come back to a little bit about what I was talking about before, about how insights homogenize. What we should be doing is saying, right, we're HSBC. We want to find out where we can express HSBC within our overall entire customer experience. What are all the different opportunities? And it's that understanding of HSBC and how that comes through the entire customer experience that should be the North Star, not what the consumer wants. Because what the consumer wants is to just get in and out of that banking experience as quickly as possible. But that's what creates what I call a Teflon brand, a brand that doesn't stick, just in and out straight away. And that's not a good business model. You want a brand that kind of captures people's imagination, makes them work, makes them put effort in, makes them understand the whole thing. And that takes brand-centered thinking, not human-centered thinking.
I hope we have a couple of design thinking practitioners in the audience today so that they can come back with their questions, saying why they think design thinking is not BS, and it can go into a livelier zone. So if we have design thinking practitioners, please have your questions out there. We will, I think, be switching down to taking audience Q&As. Before we do that, one last question, Adam, and Louise will be helping you pick up those questions. She'll be helping with that, so you don't have to worry about it. We'll make life easy for you. One last question before we take up all the audience question. There have been 2-3 controversies recently. One was around, and we're talking brands and communication. One was around the whole Nike ad with Colin Kaepernick, in the US, around a year or so back, year and a half back. Very recently, it's very topical. In India, we've had this huge controversy around a particular jewelry brand, which kind of released an ad which showed 2 religious communities. The girl from our community is married to a different community. And then the family in that community is okay with her observing her original religious rituals or whatever, right? The rituals from her original community. And I think the brand was trying to make a beautiful story saying, regardless of your religion or communities, we can all come together, celebrate, and buy some gold or jewelry at the end of the day, right? It led to a massive backlash in the country. Twitter, Facebook amplified, and it went down to a zone where even LinkedIn posted now started floating, right? What is a brand supposed to do in a world like this, where opinions get amplified a lot, and the negative attracts a lot more opinion. Controversies out there seem, it's quite possible no one's going to take the time to go out and harm an employee because they aired this particular ad. But the conversation make it seem larger possible than it actually is the situation. So what is the brand supposed to do in a world like this? Are they supposed to even have strong point of views, or stay away from having a strong point of view on certain subjects? How would you interpret this, Adam?
I think it's going to be impossible for a brand. I think it's almost impossible now for a brand to not have an agenda. I think by not having an agenda is almost the agenda. So you're going to have to you're going to have to say what you believe in and what you don't. And I think the Nike example is a beautiful example of a brand that understands what the brand stands for. And I think it's making its decisions and its sponsorship of Kaepernick was driven by them knowing who they are as a brand and using that as an opportunity to strengthen their brand values. The Indian example sounds a bit like the Kylie Jenner Pepsi kind of example, where it was just so tone deaf and just so ridiculous. These two communities are not going to start loving each other just because they're buying whatever the brand was that tried to create world peace. It's just not going to happen. And I reckon that's part of the inauthenticity of this bullshit around customer, that we're listening to the customer. I reckon businesses and brands are getting so divorced from the customer that they're finding it hard as organisations to actually truly be listening. So I think they're hoodwinking themselves. When I wrote my first book, is called The Advertising Effect. It's a bit more about the psychology of advertising. But in that book, I talk about the fact that psychologists used to never say they're in the behaviour change business. A psychologist would never say they're in the business of changing someone's behaviour, because that sounded too evil. But it's bullshit, right? All psychologists want to do is change people's behaviour. And if you don't admit that, you can't deal with the ethics underneath it, or you can't deal with the nuance underneath it. And I reckon it's the same thing. And that's why I'm calling out human-centered design and all that stuff as bullshit, because I reckon it actually deafens us to actually listening to people. If we really think we're putting consumers first and putting consumers at the heart of decision-making, then it's almost like 1984 Orwellian newspeak and doublespeak. It's just bullshit. We're in the business of building businesses. We're not in the business of making people happy.
Thank you so much, Adam. No,
I didn't mean for that to end so negatively.
No. It's a lovely line of thinking. It's a fantastic argument, and the whole point about authenticity. Well, we talk about that a lot with our clients too. A lot of people, it's something we keep on talking from work point of view, saying you need to have a point of view, and your point of view cannot be for the duration of that ad. You need to be that brand. So it's nice to see. Okay, it's on the right track. The thinking, Adam approves. So fantastic. I would like to keep on talking, but we have got a lot of questions from fantastic folks all over. Louise, please help us with the moderation of the Q&As. All yours.
Thanks very much, Prakash. Thanks, Adam. As I say, if I suddenly disappear, you'll have to jump in, but I think I'm still okay. Nuala was just commiserating with me. I don't know if it's a Dublin thing, but Wi-Fi's all over the place at the moment. I love that you said about reading widely, Adam. I was chatting with somebody in the week and we were saying, regardless of how much you read online and listen to other people's opinions, the value of actually reading something yourself is kind of tenfold. And even if you just take one thing from it, it's always worth the experience and the effort. So I have a question here now from Subhash. I don't know if he wants to ask it himself. Subhash, you're not on camera. Are you with us? I'll press on unless he jumps in. So Subhash was asking Adam about the fine line between making it, on the one hand, easy for the customer and then introducing friction, so making it a little bit difficult to increase involvement. He's asked, can you talk of some example beyond IKEA I'm thinking maybe of your hotel example in the book, but I'll leave it to you to expand on that, Adam.
This is the coolest stuff in the book, is something called the effort paradox. The effort paradox means the more effort you put into something, the more you value it. The best example of that, for those of you who have kids, is kids. They're bloody hard work. You put a shitload of effort in, and no matter what they end up like, you love them just because you've sunk so much cost into raising them. And it's the same as going to IKEA. You know, you spend an hour traveling to the store, an hour going through the store. You then buy the stuff. You then then build it, and then you love it. And you know, you can look at Michael Norton's stuff from Harvard Business School. So the effort paradox is really, really strong. The more effort you put in, the more you value it. However, at the other side of that is there's ease, and the easier it is to do something, the more likely it is you're going to do it. And so we're obsessed in behavioural economics with nudging and so forth to make it easier for people to do what you want them to do. That duality of lots of effort and value versus ease and sales or efficiency is really interesting physically, but it's also really interesting mentally. There's something called cognitive, and this is the work of a guy called Adam Atler, who's a psychologist at NYU. And he looks at cognitive fluency and cognitive disfluency. And cognitive fluency is something that's really easy to process. It's called cognitive fluency, and we're much more likely to believe it and go along with it. And it's the reason why ads always rhyme and use alliteration. We use bolds and repeat things to make it really easy to process. And if it's easy to process, you believe it. But cognitive disfluency is when it's really hard to process the information or hard to work out what's going on. If you're more likely to ignore it, but if you do process that, then it's even more sticky, and you're more likely to remember it. So I guess the rule is, if you've got a creative idea, or you've got a plan to make people stick and get them treacle into whatever you want them to do, then do that, because they're going to value that thing more. But if you don't, if you're not good enough to do that, if you're not IKEA and you're just a local retailer, then make it really easy for them to get in and out and buy.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And Jing's got a question. I don't know if you want to ask the question yourself, Jing. I feel like I know where you're going to go with this, Adam, with your dislike of hyper-targeting. Jing, you were asking about different approaches for the different type of customers. Would you like to ask Adam yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Adam.
Hi.
I have to confess that I haven't read your book, so a lot of questions might be able to, I might be able to find the answer after reading the book, just based on, listening to your talk today. I think your idea is very controversial, because it's kind of against everything that I have learned and been told so far. So it's really good to kind of have that controversial thinking that kind of make me question myself to see if there is a better approach, which is your approach. So, but anyway, so back to my question is that what I work in marketing, so we always talk about customer-centric and focusing on the customer, listening to the customers. But I wonder if there is a different approach between existing customers and new customers. So if you want to be creative, is that more applicable when you're trying to attract new customer? But if you want to hold on to the customers that you have, don't you have to listen to them so they stay with you? And that will help the customer loyalty. Because if you don't listen to the customer who's paying you or buying from you, would you not lose them?
Well, if you listen to the customer, what do you think they'll say? What do you think they'd want?
They might be happy or not happy. And if they're not happy, don't you need to find out why they're not happy? And therefore that you will, improve on your, whether it's product functioning or whether it's design, whether it's, like you can come up with an app or something, and there will be some kind of design flaws where customer give you feedback and saying, well, I don't think this is good.
Yeah. I mean, I've never thought of it in terms of new customers versus existing customers as a way to divide my approach to insights or marketing. And I think that's an interesting thought in just doing it like that. And often businesses are set up with acquisition and retention, and so being on the client side, I can maybe see why you think of those two things as separate, but I don't. But that's not to say it's not a worthy dichotomy.
Yeah.
But we're working with a fitness company at the moment, and it's a gym, and it wants to keep people at the gym for longer. And the client had the idea of reducing memberships, so the longer you stay, the cheaper your membership becomes. And they thought it was a great idea because that's what their customers saying, they want to be rewarded for their loyalty. But to me, it seemed ridiculous. It seemed like you're just going to give away money for people who are going to stay at the gym anyway, number one. And number two is you're just going to reduce their incentives to stay, because at the moment their incentive is intrinsic. They're staying there to get fit for aspiration to be the best version of they can. But if you start financially rewarding them to stay there by giving them reduced rates, then you're taking away that inner drive and replacing with an external one, which isn't as strong. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I'll just come back. I'll try to, as much as possible, come back to what the marketing sciences, behavioural sciences says about customers, and use that as your foundation. Hang on, Sarah, guys. Hey, mate, how are you? You want to say hello to these people?
No.
All right, you're going to go to bed? Come kiss?
No, not on screen.
Okay, not on screen. All right. See you, mate. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, then I've finished my question with another question, which is burning question in my head, is that if you say, again, this could be in the book, if you say don't listen to your customers, then who should we listen to?
The brand.
Yeah, but it's who is creating the brand? The couple of marketing executives that's on the marketing team, or the owner himself or herself, or it's only going to be a handful of people who's working on the brand. And where do you get your source of information or creativity from? Isn't it like always go back to the people, the human that you're talking to, that your brand is communicating with?
So if I was working at Apple, I'd ask Steve Jobs what to do. I wouldn't ask the consumer.
Okay, but where does he get the information from? Or inspiration?
From his head. From his life experience. If I was Richard Branson, I'd be asking Richard if this feels right or not. Now, not all business have a charismatic leader who just knows instinctively what the business is about. It's absolutely true. But the more you can capture what the essence of that brand's about, and has that brand and the brand meaning guide all the decision making. But Lurpak is Lurpak butter in your market? Lurpak.
No, I'm based in Ireland as well, so we have a lot of Irish dairy products, Irish brand.
There's a million different brands that have got a really, really strong essence, or Skittles or something like that. And everyone who works on those brands knows that brand and knows what that brand's about, because it's been disseminated through the organisation really, really tightly. So that's where I would start. I'd look internally, understand what the brand's about. If a brand had a heyday that's not there now, then I'd understand what was happening in the heyday of that brand. If it was doing really well in its history, I'd understand there. And whenever we try to understand a brand and what a brand stands for, the last person we're interested in their opinions is the consumer. We're much more interested in the people who work in that brand and on that brand to know what it's about, rather than consumers.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to see somebody challenging the challenging the guest. That's what I like, Adam. A good bit of controversy there. And
Thanks for the question.
as you say, it needs to be the priority of marketing to define what a brand stands for, even though that's a tough challenge, isn't it? It is tough, but you've got to have it clear in your mind.
Yep.
So now we've a question here from Daria. Daria, would you like to ask your question yourself about high involvement products?
Sure. Thanks, Louise. Yes, I was just thinking more about luxury brands and ethical brands, where brand really does matter, and I really wanted to ask your view on that. Yeah, thanks.
What's the question?
So the question is, your argument is consumers are not interested in the brands, they're interested in the category. But with ethical brands and luxury brands, isn't it sometimes that the brand actually comes first?
Is it? I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that. For ethical brands and for luxury brands, if something's really, really branded, no matter what it is, if something's really differentiated from all the other brands, then it creates what we call a category of one. It becomes the only option. And the example I use in the book is a friend of mine has a website that teaches people how to have really positive sexual experiences. It's a porn site and it's all touchscreen and interactive, but it teaches women in particular how to have pleasurable sex. There's nothing else like it on the internet. It's called OMG Yes. So if you're looking for a porn site that teaches pro-social, good, positive sexual experiences, they're the only ones to go to. So they own the category. So the category is the driver. And in that case, I'd go for it. If you are a luxury good and you lose your Hermes scarf, I still think you're going to want another scarf. I don't think you're going to necessarily have to replace it with a Hermes one. You might take advantage and buy a Gucci one or something. And with ethical products, I'm not sure the line between ethical and unethical is very, very blurry, and I wouldn't say they're ethical or they're not, but I think it's the same principle.
I guess what I was curious about is that it's not quite as black and white in terms of whether consumers want a category first or a brand. Sometimes, particularly with luxury brands around automotive industry, someone really wants a Mercedes. They just want a Mercedes. They don't want a car. They want a BMW, and then they want a particular type of BMW.
Yeah, I hear your point. It happens occasionally. Very, very, I'd say very, not that often. So even somebody who's had a BMW for 10 years, when their BMW conks out, they'll probably go, fuck, I need a car. Oh, I'm going to get another BMW. You know, it's not the whole consideration set. It's now just BMW. There will be other things around the side there as well. But that's what brands need to do. They need to try to minimize choice and become the only option. But I think I think that's the ambition for them. But I think it's hard.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Daria. And there's been a lot of interest in your conversation about creativity, Adam. Steve Udit, hi, how are you doing? You would like to raise a point about Adam's conversation on creativity.
Yeah. Hi, Adam. Thanks very much for this stimulating talk. I really like what you said about creativity, because I teach in an art school, and it's one of the things that I've been talking to students forever about, right? So, and I think that even with design thinking and behavioral economics, behavioral economics, just like design thinking, might be seeing itself as a pathway to enter the creative fields. Sadly, I feel sometimes it seems to now have taken over the spotlight, where in the engine room, you have the creatives really turning out heavy stuff. And there is very little notice, very little understanding. So one I mean, one of the things I wanted to say is just really support what you were saying about creativity, because it's a very difficult thing to pin down. Even if we take from the 60s till now, when we had great designers writing about design methods and so on, and people are still writing about design methods. Even if we compile all of that, that creativity, that magic is still hard to pin down. So my challenge to you is your next book should be on that.
Yeah,
try and put it down for us.
I like the way you're speaking. This week, our agency created. We have Vegemite. I'm sure most of you would have heard of Vegemite. It's a massive spread in this market, and we developed. And when you use Vegemite, sometimes you get butter in your Vegemite because you put butter on, and then the Vegemite using the same knife. So we created a double-ended knife. So on one end it's got a blade for the butter, on the other end it's got a blade for the Vegemite. So it's a bit of a joke product, but it's gone a bit nuts over here. We released that on Thursday. Yesterday we released for Haagen-Dazs Ice Cream, an empty bag of frozen peas that you can put your Haagen-Dazs into, so that you can put that in the freezer so that people can't find the Haagen-Dazs. They just think it's frozen peas. And both of those are kind of, if that was a human-centered designer, they would call them behavioural hacks or some shit. But they're just creative ideas, but they've got a behavioural slant to them. I love the idea, but the issue with just genuine creators is they've got no way of articulating why their creative ideas work, or the language around how they're communicating at an emotional level with someone else. So I'd feel more comfortable if that was the bedrock was creativity, and then on top of that sat these other disciplines, rather than those other disciplines becoming pathways for creativity. So I'm just going to, Steve, I reckon it's a really good point you make, and I just want to agree with you.
Yeah, let me just say something quickly though. It's sort of like, if behavioral economics, behavioral designers and design thinkers thought there should be a typographic solution to something, they might all, come in and do this typographic solution. But if you're not trained in creativity and trained to sense these things, you might miss the kerning,
Yeah.
and you might not be able to fall in love with a Q or a G. And this is what really matters, It's,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't approach the practice like it's paint by numbers.
Yeah.
This is just my thought. And thanks very much to you and to everyone.
Thanks so much, Steve. And we'll stay on the same theme if Vishal is here to ask his own question. I can't see if you're here, Vishal. I can see you're here, sorry, but I can't see you. I'm going to press on unless you want to jump in. Just to stick to the same subject about creativity, Adam, Vishal's asking if you think that organizations lack creative risk-taking, which kind of is the theme we're on at the moment.
Yeah, I think they do. I think creativity is the magic solution for everything. And the one thing I want my agency to be known as is a creative agency. And I think I just think that's where the breakthrough ideas happen, with genuinely creative solutions. And I think marketing sciences, behavioural economics, is all good. It's all good. It's either good to help get there, or it's good to help sell the idea once you've got there. Either or, it can be useful in both explaining, but also in kind of getting into the right zone. But I think it kind of protects. So I think maybe think of marketing sciences, behavioural economics, or genuine understanding of how people operate as insurance against creativity, or layers to wrap creativity in to protect the creativity and to make it happen, because people understand it more and can explain themselves more. And so therefore it de-risks it because we understand it more.
Thanks. There's definitely a lot of interest in that subject, Adam. Shirley, would you like to address your question to Adam about the pursuit of profit? Would you
Sorry,
like me to? Yeah.
I'll let you say it because it's so far back I can't remember.
Right, yeah, and I will at this point say to everybody, I've got a stack of questions here, Adam. I can see 37 there, but we definitely won't get through them all, but I'll just keep plodding on as best I can. So, Adam, Shirley was asking, do you think that the pursuit of profit drives practical mediocrity and homogeneity also, as well as this over-reliance on consumer feedback?
Yeah, I would like everybody to lower their aspirations, whether they be a business, as an individual, everything. I'd like us all to be worse at everything we do and slower at everything we do, and just a bit shit at everything we do. And I'd like to slow the whole thing down. But I don't quite know what the impact of the economy is, or on developing nations, or
it's 21
or if that's a stupid thing to do. But we've just started a social cause agency called DOA, and DOA stands for Decade of Action, but it also is the acronym for Dead on Arrival, which is a little head nod to the fact that there's no business model on a dead planet, is what we like to say. And so so we're trying to reconcile what the alternative is, because profit can steer an organisation and get shit done better than anything else. And so I don't know what the answer is, but like you, Shirley, we're wrestling with the question.
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking of something with great interest. Thank you. And I noticed you said something about architecture early on and how it's got so bland and plain compared to how beautiful it used to be. And I thought a lot of that is around economy.
That's right.
Let's build a cheap square box,
yeah,
and put a bit of pretty paint or something. And
economy,
yeah,
efficiency, and focus groups are doing that as well. They're taking off all the rough edges, all the beauty, all the interesting bits, all of that. And I'll just bucket all of that into efficiency. And we're in this massive drive for doing things efficiently, and that scares me as well. And I think that's also stripping us of our souls as well, and even this Zoom call, having to do this on Zoom, and the efficiency we can now talk to everyone and all that kind of stuff, that worries me greatly. Have you seen Wiley, the cartoon?
Yes.
Yeah. So that, to me, so any kind of science, I talk about it a bit in the book, but any kind of science fiction writer, when they're projecting forward, the world is more efficient. We're all wearing the same stuff. We've all got the same haircut. We're all walking in unison and all of that kind of stuff. And that's because we're all in these feedback loops. We're all getting feedback on the right things, right way to do things. And, people much smarter than I have kind of theorized that humans used to have a much broader range of emotions than we do now, but we're just lopping those down and becoming more and more and more intolerant of anybody who doesn't quite fit the mold. And so this efficiency, whether it's being a building or a human, is already is already on us. But I don't quite have the intellect or language to move the conversation forward.
No, that's
Thanks
good.
so
Thank
much,
you.
Shirley.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shirley. And I really like this next question, Adam, and I'm conscious of the time here now, but we had a little exchange, Adam, where I sent something to you and you emphasized the importance of influence at a certain age. Subash has asked here, has the role of brands changed from the previous era? Are brands losing their power? I'd be very conscious of the fact that my awareness of advertisements from when I was a certain age, singing their jingles, and they're still ingrained in my memory now. And I doubt whether many 10-year-olds today will say that in however many years' time. No. Would you like to talk about that subject, Adam?
I think they will, only more so. So I think today's consumer, young consumer, is the least marketing savvy consumer that's ever existed. I see them as like a cat in an apartment. They live in a completely brand, super saturated environment. They don't know a branded environment from a non-branded environment. Everything is branding, and they can't remove themselves from it. So I don't think they're terribly sophisticated in terms of understanding how brands work. As opposed to my father, who could walk into a hardware store and buy a really good hammer, knowing the good hammer from the bullshit one that's gonna just break. And so I kind of feel like that's the kind of the guiding framework. Just the other question on age, most of us, our brains are most receptive to forming new and long-term memories from about 8 to about 16 or something. So in those formative years, that's why it's so important for Coca-Cola to keep on targeting that 13-year-old boy, even though they're not meant to say that, because that's the time of your life when memory structures form and get stuck, and that's going to happen with your 10-year-old now. And sorry, I think you said we'll start to form a whole lot of relationships with brands over the next 5 years that will stay with her the rest of her life, just like you did.
Thanks, Adam. So have you time for another question, Adam?
I reckon one more.
That's great. Okay, so Michelle has a very good question, which I'm again very interested in personally. And she says, "Beyond, don't listen to the
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, that's great, Michelle. Would you like to ask your question about?
Yeah. Hello, Adam. Sorry, I won't
Hey,
put my
Michelle.
camera on. I'm in lockdown in quarantine in Sydney.
Oh, gosh.
Just got here from France. Yeah, look, I suppose I'm just building on your point of view on efficiency. I wrote this question probably 40 minutes ago, but I'm interested in you and the group's thoughts on where market research has got to. So, I mean, I tend to and have always tended to agree with most everything you say. But adding to that now, I think there's a global conspiracy. I think there's an Uber panel of people who are happy to spend 40 minutes for 10 air miles answering questions on just about anything. And that's kind of where so much quantitative research has gone to. So not only are clients thinking they're listening to consumers, but they're listening to this remote person that we've never met, that's been sold to us by a third-party vendor because they're incredibly cheap and we can talk to a lot of them. So I think that's my global conspiracy theory at the moment.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. We have a market research arm. We call our market research company Hocus Focus. And the reason why it's called Hocus Focus is because so much of it is smoke and mirrors, and our ambition is to be less shit. And we have half the company does what we call happy research. And happy research has nothing, but we give up on any pretense to do anything except for give the client what they want. And if a client wants evidence that this is good, we'll give them evidence that it's good. If they want it bad, we'll give them evidence that it's bad. You know, it's just, you know, and we're honest about that. And at least if we're honest about that, we can strip away the artifice. Like I used to work in the prison. I used to do court reports as a forensic psychologist. And so reports in court, unless you're in Paris, have an inquisitional system. They're either requested by the defence or the prosecution, and yet they're meant to be objective. And so a psychologist is writing a report for the defense, for somebody in the defence, meant to be objective to go to the court. But of course, it's going to be skewed towards helping the defence. It's like the prosecution one's going to be skewed towards the. And it's just absurd to think we can be ethical when we don't just acknowledge the fact that if someone's paying you for a market research report and they've got an agenda, then the market research report should just will be influenced by that agenda. So yes.
Thanks for that great question. And I think we can all go away today with that message on our mind, Adam, with our ambition to be less shit is really something we can really all gather together and aim for. Maybe we'll all add it as kind of a tagline on our LinkedIn pages so that we know we were all here together on this date. So it just remains for me to thank all of you for joining us from all over, wherever you are, at whatever time it is for you there. To thank Adam for joining us and being very generous with his time. It's been a really great great chat. We've covered so many different areas, Adam, so I hope you've enjoyed chatting with our members.
It's been lovely. Loved it. Thank you so much for having me along. It's been great.
That's our pleasure, Adam, and I'll just hand back over to Prakash to wrap up the event. And thanks everyone again.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Adam. Guys, those who are still here, okay, good number still here. If you have read the book, I think the book warrants a second reading. This is our book of the month. We are going to be revisiting the book end of this month. So please go out for a second reading. Those who have not, please get your copy and read because it has got fantastic stuff. For example, does your company really need a CEO? Now, I leave you all with that question. Read that book, you'll find the answer. And you can walk with a lot of confidence to your CEO and like, I don't think we need you. Don't say it's me. Point it out to Adam and like, okay, this dude says he knows a lot of stuff. Be safe, take care, wear your masks, go vote, be good, be less shit. Yeah, be less shit. Thank you so much, Adam, for that. Everyone, have a good weekend ahead.
Good on you. Unreal.
Bye, everyone. Thanks
Fantastic.
so much.
Take care, everyone.